The Black Struggle. My name is Mark Morrison, and I am a freshman chemistry major at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I, along with other freshmen, Jada Staten, Taylor Doggett, and Seventh Woods, are trying to define the Black Struggle. We, along with most Black people, agree that the Black Struggle exists. However, nobody has really put to words what that struggle is. In order to find out what it was, we interviewed several students and teachers here on campus, as well as did some research on our own. So, what do you think the Black Struggle is?
The Black struggle, I think, comes from and stems from a lack of resources within our Black communities. It stems from a lack of equity between different races. And that's not something that many are willing to address because, one, it's uncomfortable, and two, it would take an uncanny amount of change, just an incredible amount of change, and putting resources into these systems that have been in place to keep certain people on top for so long.
Yes, I do believe there's a Black struggle. In that I feel as if we're combating institutionalized racism, ingrained self-hate, and last one, probably a disconnect in regards to our identity historically.
And so, I mean, this is long embedded in American history, obviously. But I think in particular, the issues that African Americans have to face today, certainly there's this notion of the undeserving poor. And that's not just Black people, but Black people certainly fall into that category, right? Then there's also this question of their American identity. And I think we've seen that very clearly in the last election and in responses to our current president. African Americans are not considered to be citizens in the same way as a lot of white people are. And some of that is just sort of rhetoric and, whether or not you buy into, the American system and all of that. But other parts of it is just, it's class-based, it's identity politics, suggesting that Black people shouldn't have the same sorts of rights to the vote as white people because they're sort of, peons of white liberals or whoever, or that African Americans shouldn't have the same sorts of privileges and rights in terms of incarceration, the justice system, that sort of a thing. I think those are all issues unique to African Americans, absolutely. Sounds great. There's sort of what we call like a Black tax on faculty often. So if there's like a Black history committee, if there's any sort of like minority advising group or anything like that, I'm almost immediately put on those sorts of committees. So, I don't have tenure yet. I'm still really starting off on what's going to be hopefully a long career here. But I mean, I'm on tons of committees, that do relate quite specifically to race.
But there have been moments where I've felt as if students will question my authority on a certain issue because I'm Black, not white, or a person of color. I do think that I get challenged more than my white colleagues and my white male colleagues. I definitely think being a person of color and being a woman combined can be difficult in terms of people always trying to check whether you really know what you're talking about. And
Especially being a person of color, more specifically a woman of color, a Black woman, I find myself being the only Black woman in my lectures sometimes, which can be overwhelming. And my peers that are part of the majority will never be able to relate to that uncomfortable feeling or overwhelmed feeling.
People suffer from this imposter syndrome where you just never feel good enough. You always have to prove you belong to be somewhere. I feel like I'm slowly getting past that.
I think it definitely alters my experience because I can't walk around here and just feel like I can do anything or go anywhere. I don't feel like I can just walk into a frat party. I don't feel like, I feel like I belong in my own community. That community is very small, and so, you know, whereas a white student could just not even pay attention to the Black community, or not ever go to a Black party or anything like that, like literally almost all of Franklin Street and the surrounding area are frat houses. Like if I go to Franklin Street on Friday night, I'm sitting here looking at all this stuff. So,
especially in the class of 2017, there's not very many people who look like me. That being Black males. So just finding people who can kind of relate to everyday, not necessarily struggles, but just experiences. From the smallest interactions passing by someone.
Or the base of the struggles that we face are not our own fault. And even climbing out of that hole is hard, and I don't blame people for struggling through it. But I think that we definitely can have a part in our own uplift. In other words, I feel like we can I feel like it's almost on us if we don't reach out to the community, and if we don't try to just try to make it better for those who are coming after us, like the ones before us did.
Human beings are flawed, like just in general, and I don't think Black people are in any way more flawed than other people, but I think the community tends to have like even more problems because of the structural racism that exists. And yeah, I personally get very annoyed when I hear people talking about like Black on Black crime or fatherless families, you know, or what's another one? I don't know, kids need to pull their pants up. To me, that's all like distracting from the real problems.
And I think that somewhere along the way we've lost that sense of community just because we come from so many different walks of life now. You know, we have the Blacks who live in suburban areas and Blacks who live in more like inner city project areas. You know, we have those who are like the affluent Blacks who come from families of lawyers and doctors and stuff. And so like with that, those different lived experiences bring together a different view on the Black struggle. And I think once we get to like a unified view of the Black struggle, we won't do ourselves in as much as we do. Jerry, you're gonna see, I've been able to kind of do that and kind of be able to take this thing that was meant as a disadvantage and kind of use it to my advantage. And so, so I would say that's kind of how it's affected me.
What do you think we can do? Well, I think one of the things we're doing currently that is helping is really just being unified. I think that if you just go on campus and you go to certain places of campus, you'll see lots of African Americans interacting with one another. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I don't think it's necessarily like de facto segregation, but in some ways it kind of is. And it's not necessarily that we are separating ourselves from the rest of the community, but it's, hey, you feel comfortable with people that can relate to you, with people that understand you, or you assume to understand you better. And so there, you see those groups of people, and they seem to be just enjoying and doing this walk of college together. And I think that is one thing that definitely helps, not feeling like you're alone, or feeling like you have to go through this without a community. I think that although the numbers may say 9 or 10%, when you get on this campus, it feels a lot smaller than that. So I think that when you're able to do it together, I think that is one thing that certainly helps.
More recently, we've done a lot of sit-ins, die-ins, blackouts, kind of showing our respect and condolences to the families who have been affected by police brutality en masse, together as a unit.
I think it does, because the thing with Black struggle, the thing with struggle, period, any type of struggle, it brings people together because they all understand what's going on, and it creates a sense of solidarity.
I think that That's a complicated question, in that theoretically you would think that it would, but practically it doesn't always. And so, in many ways, since we are all kind of united by a common ancestry and a common struggle in this country, you would feel that it would unify us to a greater degree than what it does. And
I think it can bond a community tighter if responded to correctly. But I also feel like it leaves opportunity for outside voices or outside forces to kind of provide a wedge if not handled correctly.
Carolina Day. Last year, my sophomore year, and I'm a music major, so I had a performance during the day, and I was with a group of my friends, and we performed. And during Carolina Day, there was a BSM, Black Student Movement protest. And so they finished their protest, and Chancellor Falk said, "Isn't it wonderful that we go to a university that allows students to speak openly and how they feel?" And I'll never forget this. After the entire Carolina Day was over, there was a reception for the chancellor and for the performers and for the other faculty members. And I was standing with my friend Atticus and Nathan, both Caucasian, and I distinctly remember Chancellor Falk coming up to Nathan, shaking his hand, saying, "Good job." I was standing in between both of them. I stuck my hand out, she did not shake it, and then shook my friend Atticus' hand, and then said, "Wonderful job to all of you," and smiled. And then as she walked away, I tried to jokingly play it off with my friends, and I said, "Did anyone notice how Chancellor Falk didn't shake my hand?" And they both laughed and said, "What? No, not really." And it was just funny because not only does the fact that I'm Black, which therefore associates me with the Black student movement and the protests that happened, not only did that affect my interaction with Chancellor Falk, but it also affected the interaction with my other friends who didn't quite get or quite understand what was happening afterwards.
And I got into like a very heated debate with my uncle about this because my dad and all his brothers and sisters grew up in a very like low income, very poor neighborhood. And you know, when I get on the phone and I'm like, "Hey, Uncle Ricky, like, you know, Black Lives Matter movement, and we're gonna take down big government," you know, and he's like, "Hush, you don't know what you're talking like." And it hurts me a little bit because I'm like, I'm helping, like I think I'm doing my part. And he's just like, he was just basically saying that not that that he wanted to be on the front lines, but he was just saying that there are a whole lot of struggles that I guess me as a middle class, you know, young woman doesn't understand that he and his brothers and sisters went through.
Our campus, I'm a historian obviously, and our campus bears the name of the Keenan family that owned slaves. Okay? That is all over the place. And one of the things that's heightened my awareness is when I first got here, I met a member of the Keenan family who actually, we were talking about the Vietnam War, at one point decided to tell me that his family owned slaves, and that when Sherman came to their plantation, that their sort of the Black matriarch of that slave community said, "We're fine here, turn around." And so it's one thing to have sort of these buildings on campus that are named after former slaveholders, which I have problems with morally for obvious reasons, but then it's another to interact with people and the conversation immediately goes there. And it was just sort of, I'm standing there being this basically, you know, this absorbent material for them to sort of assuage their white guilt. Like, "Oh, let me tell you, because you're a Black person." He clearly wouldn't have said that to a white person of my same age or gender, I think.
My people, we may bend, but we don't break.